The galaxy is full of graveyards. We, the galactic hegemony, have cataloged thousands of them. We have given each a designation, a file number, and a brief epitaph written in sterile scientific language. Silent spheres of rock, ice, and gas worlds where chemistry flirted with biology for a fleeting moment, where molecules aligned just long enough to dream of life before being erased by the unforgiving arithmetic of the universe. We know these places well. We understand the limits of biology because we have spent millennia defining them. We know precisely how much radiation a cell can absorb before its molecular bonds unravel into useless fragments. We know the pressure threshold at which a standard exoskeleton collapses inward, joints liquefying, supports folding like paper. We know the exact temperature at which blood, regardless of species, ceases to be fluid and becomes vapor. The universe does not negotiate, it enforces. Stars burn too hot, gravity pulls too hard, atmospheres poison, freeze, or crush. Most worlds never even get the chance to fail at life. They are stillborn, hostile from the moment they coalesce out of cosmic dust. Others tease possibility for a few million years before catastrophe wipes the slate clean. We log them all. We learn, we move on. That is how civilization survives. But then there was K402. In the archives, it sits alone, wrapped in warning sigils and crimson hazard markers. Among survey crews and long-range astrophysicists, it earned a simpler name, one that spread quickly and stuck. The Butcher. From a distance, K402 did not resemble a planet so much as a wounded eye staring back at the cosmos. Its cloud layers churned endlessly, thick and violent, swirling in bruised purples and jagged grays. The lightning did not flash and fade as it does on civilized worlds. It crawled, forked, and lingered, illuminating the atmosphere in sustained arcs of raw energy. Even from orbit, it looked angry. Closer inspection only made it worse. The planet's gravity measured 2.4 standard GS, a crushing force that pressed relentlessly downward. For most known species, standing unassisted on its surface would result in shattered bones within minutes. A fully armored Voltite warrior, bred for war and reinforced with dense musculature, would have their legs snap like dry twigs beneath their own weight. And that was before the air tried to kill you. K402's atmosphere was a dense, corrosive brew, a toxic soup of sulfuric acid aerosols, nitrogen compounds, and heavy particulates held under immense pressure. Winds screamed across the surface at hypersonic speeds, fast enough to strip exposed flesh from bone in seconds. Even a Krogan, famous for its redundant organs and near-mythical resilience, would be flayed alive if caught outside protective shielding for more than a heartbeat. Rain fell often on K402. It was not water, it was acid, concentrated enough to eat through untreated alloys, hissing as it struck the obsidian plains below. Those plains stretched endlessly, black, glassy, and razor-sharp, formed from ancient magma seas that cooled too quickly and too violently to allow mercy. Mountains rose like shattered blades, their edges capable of tearing open landing craft hulls if pilots drifted even slightly off course. There was no green, no blue, no sign that life had ever been welcome. For over 3 billion years, the Butcher remained exactly as it was, empty, hostile, and patient. Our probes descended, transmitted their data, and died. Sensors found no organic residue, no microbial fossils, no chemical footprints that suggested biology had ever gained a foothold. Even extremophiles harvested from the most hellish environments known to the hegemony failed within hours. K402 was not merely lethal, it was absolute. The High Council reviewed the data once, then unanimously classified it as a Category 0 world, total biological exclusion. A place where chemistry itself refused to take the next step toward life. A planet written off as a permanent warning, a reminder that not every corner of the universe was meant to be touched. Its file was closed, its fate decided, and then the humans found it. And instead of recoiling, instead of filing the same report we had filed 1,000 times before, they looked at K402, the gravity, the poison, the screaming winds, the endless black glass, and they said, yes, this one. For 3 billion years, the butcher sat in the dark, hungry and empty. Our probes returned images of obsidian plains and mountains of jagged glass. There was no green, there was no blue. There was only the sound of the wind, screaming like a dying god. The Hegemony High Council officially declared K402 a Category 0 world, total biological exclusion. Not even the hardiest extremophiles from the volcanic vents of Scylla could survive there. It was a place where chemistry refused to become biology. Then the humans found it. They didn't find it by accident. They didn't stumble upon it in a moment of desperation. No, they scanned it, they saw the data, they looked at the same death toll statistics that we did, and they smiled. I remember the day the first human colony ship, the Spirit of Endurance, entered the system. I was a junior observer on a Hegemony research vessel, tasked with monitoring the sector. When the human vessel broke warp, we sent a priority hail. Vessel Spirit of Endurance. We warned, you are entering the gravitational well of a Category 0 world. Correct your course immediately. There is no life on that planet. There can be no life on that planet. The response came back in a crackle of radio static, flavored with that strange, irritatingly calm human confidence. Hegemony research vessel, this is Captain Miller. We read you loud and clear, and you're right, there isn't any life down there yet. That's why we brought some with us. We watched horrified as their massive, boxy ships that looked more like industrial factories than starcraft began their descent into the butcher's maw. We expected to see them crushed by the gravity. We expected to see their hulls melted by the acid rains. But the humans didn't just land, they fought. The first 5 years were what the humans later named the siege. Not because there was an enemy army. Not because there was a war declared. But because everything about K402 behaved like a besieging force. They did not build cities. That would have been foolish. Cities imply permanence, comfort, optimism. The humans understood, perhaps instinctively, that optimism on K402 would get you killed, so they built bunkers. Low-profile, brutally reinforced structures, driven deep into the obsidian crust like iron ticks. They were ugly, angular things, half buried and deliberately forgettable, designed not to be admired but to endure. Their entrances faced away from prevailing storm patterns. Their walls were layered with composite alloys and shock, dampening lattices meant to flex under pressure rather than shatter. And to build them, the humans unleashed their machines. They called them iron mules. From orbit, the walkers looked like absurd relics, vast, multi-legged industrial platforms crawling across a world that seemed determined to crush them flat. Each step sent shockwaves rippling through the glassy plains. Their legs sank inches into obsidian that should not have yielded at all. We watched as storms rolled in, storms that would have flattened a hegemony arcology. Winds screamed at hypersonic speeds, tearing at exposed machinery, hurling acid rain sideways like liquid shrapnel. Lightning struck again and again, crawling across metal hulls in blinding sheets of violet-white energy. The iron mules staggered, some fell, and every time one collapsed, we waited for the humans to retreat. They never did. Hatches blew open against hurricane, force winds. 3, sometimes 4, humans in pressurized suits would crawl out, anchoring themselves with magnetic boots and steel cables. They huddled together against the gale, bodies pressed close not for comfort, but for survival, and welded the machine back together while acid hissed against their armor. They worked while being actively punished for existing. Why? My commander asked quietly, watching the feed scroll past in relentless detail. There are 1,000 garden worlds along the rim, stable gravity, clean air. Why choose this hell? I had no answer. So I kept watching, and slowly, uncomfortably, I realized the truth. They weren't just surviving the butcher. They were engaging it. The first clue came with the drills. Massive bore rigs descended next, towering machines designed to punch straight through planetary crust. At first, we assumed they were mining. Resource extraction would have been logical. K4-102's mantle was rich in rare metals and exotic isotopes. But the humans didn't haul ore to the surface. They tapped heat. They drilled miles deep, past unstable fault lines, into regions of crushing pressure and incandescent fury. The planet shook under the strain. Seismic readings spiked wildly, enough that our scientists feared a catastrophic destabilization. Then the power grids came online. The humans had not come to steal from the planet. They had come to listen to it. They harnessed tectonic stress, geothermal infernos, mantle convection turning planetary violence into raw energy. Power surged upward through reinforced conduits, feeding into networks that glowed beneath the surface like veins of molten gold. K4-102 screamed, and the humans translated that scream into electricity. Next came the Aegis domes. Calling them domes was misleading. These were not shelters so much as declarations. Vast electromagnetic fields projected upward from geothermal anchors, forming invisible umbrellas over entire settlements. They shimmered faintly when storms struck them, bending hurricane force winds away from fragile structures below. But the humans didn't stop there. The wind itself, those hypersonic gales that scoured the planet raw, was redirected, funneled through colossal turbines integrated into the shield arrays. What had once been a weapon became fuel. The harder the planet tried to kill them, the more power it gave them. They are using the planet against itself. One of our analysts whispered. No one argued. It was around this time that I overheard the conversation. A human engineer, Sarah, her suit smeared with grease and corrosion scars, stood with one of our senior xenobiologists inside a newly pressurized HAB unit. The biologist's tone was calm, rational, and dismissive. The soil is non-viable, he said. Nitrogen content negligible. Heavy metal saturation exceeds biological tolerance by several orders of magnitude. It is poison. Sarah laughed. Not mockingly, not defensively. She laughed the way someone does when they hear a problem they fully expect to solve. Poison's just a resource we haven't filtered yet, she said. The dirt's not dead, it's just stubborn. You cannot teach a planet, the biologist replied. Sarah leaned closer, eyes bright with a spark that unsettled even me. Watch us. From siege to sculpture, the siege did not end. It evolved. Over the next decade, brute survival gave way to something more deliberate. The humans began what they would later call the Great Leaching. They released life, trillions of microscopic organisms, engineered nanobacteria designed in human laboratories, were seeded into soil, air, and water systems. Each strain had a singular purpose: bind acids, consume heavy metals, break down toxins, excrete oxygen. To the hegemony, it was absurd. You do not rewrite planetary chemistry with bacteria. Worlds change over epochs, not lifetimes. But humans do not measure time the way we do. They think in generations. I saw children born under reinforced ceilings, gravity plates tuned to keep their bones from collapsing. I saw fathers teaching daughters how to recalibrate atmospheric scrubbers, explaining tolerances the way one might explain a game. I saw mothers guiding sons through maintenance tunnels, showing them how to patch leaks in hydro towers while alarms wailed overhead. They lived underground, in narrow metallic corridors lit by artificial suns. Outside, the butcher screamed constantly, wind, thunder, tectonic groans vibrating through the bedrock. Every child grew up knowing that a single failed seal meant death, and still they stayed. They did more than stay. They adapted. The insides of the domes changed. Bare metal walls were painted green. Artificial vines were stenciled along support beams. Speakers played recordings of birdsong, rainfall, wind through leaves, sounds from a world most of the children had never seen. Earth became a memory. K402 became home. In the 22nd year, the planet answered back. Seismic sensors screamed warnings across every frequency. A tectonic event larger than anything in hegemony records ripped through the northern hemisphere. Fault lines kilometers wide tore open. Entire regions collapsed inward as if the planet itself were convulsing. It was not an earthquake. It was a planetary spasm. 3 Aegis domes vanished into the mantle. Shield arrays flickered, then failed. Sulfur storms rushed in unopposed. From orbit, we watched in silence. No one spoke. We prepared the standard reports. Biological extinction event. Probable total loss. We expected evacuation. We expected pleading. Instead, the lights stayed on. Inside the ruins of Dome 4, pressure dropped to lethal levels. Temperatures spiked. Structural integrity alarms howled. But the comm channels were not filled with panic. They were filled with orders. Seal Sector 7. We lose the HABs. We lose the seeds. Exteriors melting. Reroute coolant now. No one leaves. I saw a helmet feed. A young human male, barely more than a child by hegemony standards, stood braced against a ruptured oxygen line. His suit was torn. Blood floated inside his helmet as pressure differentials crushed his lungs. He used his own hand to seal the breach. Another human welded over it. He did not let go. He died 3 minutes later. His name was Elias. He was 24 years old. He had never seen Earth. He was born on K402. To him, this world was not hostile. It was home. That was the moment we understood. To us, a planet is a resource or a hazard. To humans, it is a challenge, a canvas, something to be claimed not through luck, but through the stubborn, bloody-minded refusal to stay dead. The storm lasted 6 months. They rebuilt in the ruins. They breathed through masks. They ate rations that tasted like chalk and metal. They worked 20-hour shifts beneath a sky that still hated them. They did not retreat. They dug deeper. And the butcher, for the first time in its long existence, failed to finish the job. Act Roman 4. The bloom 50 years after the spirit of endurance landed. I was invited down to the surface. I was terrified. I wore a hegemony environmental suit, a masterpiece of high-tech shielding. As I stepped off the shuttle, I expected to see the obsidian wastes and the jagged glass. Instead, I stepped into a forest. It wasn't a forest like the ones on the garden worlds of the core. The trees were different. Their trunks were thick and reinforced with carbon fibers, their leaves a deep, metallic blue to better absorb the harsh radiation of the local star. They didn't sway in the wind. They stood like pillars of iron, but they were trees. The air smelled not of sulfur, but of damp earth and ozone. The humans had done it. They had filtered the poison. They had crushed the glass into soil. They had redirected the rivers of lava to boil underground reservoirs, creating a water cycle where none had existed. I met Sarah again. She was an old woman now, leaning on a cane made from a piece of K402's native obsidian. She led me to a balcony overlooking a valley that 50 years ago had been a lake of acid. Now it was a sea of blue-green grass. "How," I whispered, my voice trembling in my suit's comms, "this world was built to destroy you. It was designed to ensure nothing could ever grow here." Sarah looked out at the horizon, where the angry purple clouds were finally breaking, revealing a sliver of a pale, distant sun. "The universe is a cold place," she said softly. "It doesn't care if we live or die. Most species find a place that's comfortable and they settle in, but humans, we've never been comfortable. We were born on a planet that tried to kill us every day for 1 million years. Ice ages, predators, plagues. We learned a long time ago that if the world doesn't want you, you change the world's mind. She reached out and plucked a small, hardy flower from a pot on the railing. It was a simple thing, but it was alive. We didn't just survive the butcher, she said, a hint of a smile on her weathered face. We taught it how to be a mother. Act V. Reflection. As I left K402, I looked back at the planet through the broad viewing port of my ship. For a long moment, I could not reconcile what my eyes were seeing with what my memory insisted must be there. It was no longer a bruised eye glaring angrily into the void, no longer a churning mass of poisonous clouds and endless lightning. The violent purples and diseased grays that had once defined the butcher were still present, but they were fading, thinning, breaking apart. In their place was light, not the blinding glare of a young star or the artificial glow of orbital industry, but something softer, warmer, a faint, defiant luminescence that clung to the planet's limb like a promise. Scattered across the night side were clusters of steady illumination cities, settlements, habitats, each one a declaration that the darkness had failed to win. For the first time since its formation, K402 looked alive. The hegemony archives were updated within the cycle. K402 was formally stripped of its crimson hazard sigils. Its classification was rewritten, the old designation relegated to historical footnotes and cautionary case studies. The words Category 0, total biological exclusion, were removed, replaced by a phrase no one would have believed possible only decades earlier. Human-made paradise. The term sparked debate across academic councils and political chambers. Some argued it was imprecise. Others claimed it was dangerously sentimental. A few insisted that paradise was not something one could manufacture. None of them had stood on K402's surface. We, the galactic hegemony, have always searched for perfection. We scanned star systems for ideal distances from their suns, for stable axial tilts and gentle seasonal cycles. We look for gravity that neither crushes nor lets bodies drift apart, atmospheres that cradle life without corroding it, magnetic fields that quietly shield without complaint. We treat the universe like a landlord. We move carefully from world to world, hoping to find a place already furnished, already safe, already willing to accept us. And when we find such a place, we settle gently, careful not to disturb the balance that made it habitable in the first place. This philosophy has kept us alive for millennia. It has also kept us small. The humans do not share this fear. They do not search for comfort. They do not wait for invitation. They do not ask the universe if a place is suitable. They arrive with tools. To them, a hostile gravity well is not a warning. It is an engineering problem. A toxic atmosphere is not a death sentence. It is chemistry waiting to be reorganized. A planet that actively tries to kill them is not an enemy to flee, but a challenge to be understood. Where we see an impossible environment, humans see raw material. Where we see finality, they see potential. I have come to realize that humanity's greatest strength is not their technology, nor their adaptability, nor even their legendary resilience. It is their refusal to accept the world as it is presented. They are the only species I have ever encountered that does not ask the universe for permission to exist. They carve out space for themselves through stubborn will and relentless effort. They find the most broken, murderous corners of the dark and say, with quiet certainty, "This will do. This will be beautiful." They do not merely inhabit the galaxy, they reshape it. They are not settlers in the traditional sense. They are not conquerors either. Conquest implies destruction for its own sake. What humans do is something stranger, something far more unsettling. They take places meant for death and make them care. They turn killers into providers. They look at worlds that failed every biological equation we know and decide that the equations are wrong. I once believed humanity was arrogant. Many of us did. Their willingness to land on worlds like K400-2 struck us as reckless, even insane. Their obsession with extreme environments seemed like a pathological need to prove themselves against the universe. Why struggle so brutally for decades when safer options existed? But standing on K400-2, breathing air that once would have dissolved my lungs, watching alien trees sway beneath a sky that had learned restraint, I finally understood. It was never about pride, it was about attachment. Humans do not abandon easily once they decide something is theirs. A place, a people, a future, they cling to it with astonishing ferocity. They do not flee hardship. They endure it, adapt to it, and eventually reshape it until it can endure them in return. Their love for life is not gentle, it is fierce, it is unrelenting, it is willing to suffer, to sacrifice, to lose entire generations if it means the next one will breathe easier. The butcher did not become green because it was conquered. It became green because it was cared for half a century, without certainty of success, by people who refused to let go. As human ships continue to spread across the galaxy, we find ourselves watching their trajectories with a mixture of awe and unease. They do not head for the comfortable worlds we covet. They chart courses toward radiation, blasted rocks, frozen moons, pressure, crushed super, Earths, places we marked as permanently uninhabitable. Once we feared those places. Now, when a human vessel changes course toward them, we understand what that means. It means lights will appear where there was only darkness. It means atmosphere will be rewritten, soil coaxed into life, storms bent into service. It means that in a few decades, perhaps a century, another impossible world will quietly stop being impossible. They taught a dead planet how to breathe. They taught a killer how to provide. They took something the universe had declared final and made it ordinary. And in doing so, they taught the rest of us something profoundly unsettling. Life does not merely survive where conditions allow. Sometimes, life survives because someone refuses to let it die. For the first time since the hegemony reached the stars, we are no longer the ones defining the limits of biology, habitation, and endurance. We are students now, watching, learning, waiting to see which dead world the humans will choose next, and what miracles they will carve out of its bones. And for the first time, the galaxy truly understands what it means to be human, not fragile, not reckless, but architects of life itself.